Thank you for joining me today. Much to my South Asian, immigrant, medical doctor parents' chagrin, 14 years ago, I became an urban public school teacher. And thank you. And in that time, what I've come to know is that one of our glaring national emergencies is the educational opportunity divide between low-income youth, largely those of color, and their wealthier, mostly white counterparts. In 2014, for the first time in our nation's history, white students made up less than 50% of our public schooling population. Essentially, our school demographics are getting browner, but our teacher population remains overwhelmingly white. USA Today charted that at last count, at least 82% of our nation's teachers are white. So what do we do about this disparity? Obviously, one, we need to diversify the teacher workforce so that it more accurately reflects the young people we teach. But in the meantime, how do we address and overcome the potential cultural mismatch that exists in our nation's classrooms? Now, if some of you think you may be mismatched to teach the young people in your classrooms, let me tell you, you got it easy. Just look at this guy. I am the son of wealthy Indian immigrants who proudly rocked bell-bottom pants well into the 1980s, by the way. Living comfortably in the suburbs, coming from a family of doctors. How could this kid relate to and effectively teach urban, Black, and Latinx youth from some of the most distressed parts of cities like Los Angeles, New York, and San Francisco? How can someone from that background be a transformative teacher in the hood for over a decade? I'd like to share with you today some secrets I've learned by dispelling 3 common myths or lies ineffective teachers often tell pre- and early in-service teachers. One of the first lies that ineffective teachers would encourage us to believe is that new teachers should focus their energies on instruction and not take on any extra school responsibilities for the first few years. I was encouraged to do this by my teacher education program on numerous occasions. The logic for this myth is well-intentioned, that 1, new teachers are generally not their most effective self, and so this would allow them to focus their energies on instruction. And 2, so that new teachers don't burn out. But what's missing from that logic is that if new teachers are not their most effective self, and they limit themselves to the classroom, then they may never find themselves in a context where they see young people truly and joyfully engaged, and ultimately successful. So what do? Well, here's my secret number 1. Identify what makes your heart sing, and find a way to do that with young people at your school. Join or create spaces on campus that young people genuinely want to be. For me, I threw out the so-called wisdom my advisors gave me and immediately started coaching the school's basketball team with 2 fellow teachers and friends. I even risked being thrown out of graduate school because our games conflicted with my teacher education program's course meetings. But I intuitively knew then that I wouldn't last as a teacher anyway if I didn't feed my spirit and then share that joy with young people. Now, following this advice allows you to watch young people that others may label as lazy or apathetic race to be a part of the spaces you're leading and talk anxiously ahead of your next practice or game or session or meeting. When this is done really effectively, it can even boost academic performance. I was teaching at a school with a 50% graduation rate and a less than 30% college-going rate. But in the 5 years leading our basketball program, all 24 of our student athletes graduated, and 75% of them went on to directly attend a 4-year institution. Basketball was my bridge to young people's hearts, but any will do. The second lie I was told also occurred in my first year of teaching. After a particularly challenging day, a colleague tried to console and advise me. He said, "I've been doing this job 20 years teaching high school. And I've learned that if they wanted us to care about each kid so much, they wouldn't have put 35 of them in our classes, right?" It's understandable. There are institutional obstacles in the way of forming deep emotional bonds with the young people we teach in schools. But what I wish I would have told that teacher then was that the word educate comes from the Latin word educare, which means to rise up, to nourish. Well, how do we nourish young people to rise up if we don't care about them deeply, with the full force of our souls? But what could this look like? I'll share a short anecdote to illustrate the point. Now, I'm probably the only one in this room who felt this way, but my first year of teaching was a struggle. I mean, I knew what I was teaching wasn't as engaging or as rigorous as it could have and should have been. As I've stated before, I became the school's basketball coach as a partial way to make up for these deficiencies. One very hot, early fall day, my fellow coaches and I were eating lunch in the coach's office in the school gymnasium. Many students would eat there also to get a reprieve from the blistering Los Angeles heat. As the bell rang to signify the end of lunch and the students filed out, I heard a rustling, scurrying noise coming from the corner of the gym. I have an intense fear of rodents, so I grabbed a broom and I cautiously approached the old wooden pull-out bleachers. I'll never forget what I saw. It was a young person digging through the wrappers and cartons of discarded school lunches. I said, "What are you doing?" And he replied, "My family has no money. I'm starving." That was a moment of clarity for me. I understood then in that moment that my job as a teacher was more of a calling to be a caretaker of young people first and foremost. From that day forth, I brought 2 lunches, one for me and one for Cedric. And we made sure he was on the basketball team, even though he wasn't very good at basketball. Now, if you ask him, he'll tell you that part of the story very differently. Right? In his senior year, just after his 18th birthday, and a month before high school graduation, Cedric faced going homeless. And my wife and I invited him to move in with us. 4 years later, he graduated from Cal State University Northridge, the first in his family to do so. Now, I don't want to pretend the relationship was always roses and butterflies. It certainly wasn't. But it was truly transformative for both of us because it was based on compassion, love, and care. So I would invite you to ask yourself, what am I willing to sacrifice for the young people in my care? To what lengths would I go to ensure their most basic human needs are met? The third and final lie ineffective teachers told me throughout my career was that I needed to focus on standards-based curricula to ensure success on high-stakes testing. There's seemingly nothing malicious about emphasizing skill development and content mastery. But entirely missing from this dictate is the need for teachers to reinforce notions of self-worth and the importance of students' communities to our society's tapestry. Adrian Rich summed this up perfectly. When someone with the authority of a teacher describes the world and you are not in it, there is a moment of psychic disequilibrium, as if you were staring into a mirror and saw nothing. With devastating frequency, our schools are holding up mirrors to our most dispossessed populations, confirming their invisibility in our imagination. We need to provide mirror and window experiences for our young people. A mirror so they can see themselves or people they identify with in our curricula. And window experiences so they can find commonality with others. To do this effectively, though, we need to interrogate the blind spots in the mirrors that we're holding up to young people. When I did this, I came to understand that I was teaching history literally as his story. I can only shake my head at what I was subconsciously communicating to my students of all genders about whose contributions were worthy of study and examination. I needed to make history into her story. I needed to make history into her story as well, so that it could be our story. In closing, there is only one institution with the power in which every single young person has to regularly attend. There's only one institution young people have to attend. And it's not the church, it's not military, it's not the courts, it's school. School is the only institution, and teachers the sole profession with the power to personally reach every single young person. So let's engage youth, engage in our passions with youth, audaciously care about young people, and give them mirrors and windows that reflect their own humanity and that of others. Thank you.